Episode 4. Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of the series into Napoleon Bonaparte. We start with Battle of Friedland, 1807. It would see the participation of the French Empire and the Russian Empire in a conflict that would end in a French triumph. The events would occur sometime in June and would see the involvement of several people, amongst them Michel Ney and Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte, and on the Russian side, individuals like Bennigsen. The victory would eventually see the Russians' departure. Discussions would occur after, and the treaties of Tilsit would result. Territorial changes would also occur in the after-effects of the Battle of Friedland. Prior to these events, the Battle of Eylau had occurred. Tensions had also risen between France and Prussia. The Prussians had made demands of the French, amongst which were demands that they withdraw from certain areas. Other events would also occur, like the 1806 Battle of Jena-Auerstedt. The Battle of Jena-Auerstedt, which had ended in victory for the French forces. A conflict that would see fierce fighting and would also result in important changes in territory. The aftermath of the battles would also see massive changes and promotions for certain people, including Marshal Davout, who would gain some acclaim in the conflict. Some of the changes that would occur here would remain in effect until well into the future. At some point in time, the Prussian forces would be slow to react, leading to massive losses, and Napoleon at these points in time would be able to gain important victories. At another point in time, some of the troops under Davout and Bernadotte would be asked to join those of Napoleon. By the end of the Battle of Jena, the Prussians would have lost many men and the French would have won a considerable victory. Several individuals on the Prussian side would be taken and kept as prisoners. Events at the Battle of Eylau would involve conflicts between forces. Under Bennigsen, fight the French troops in a fierce battle that would be affected in some way by the weather. It would see massive casualties on either side. Present during the battle would be several notable people who would continue to play varied roles in the way the events unfolded on the day, in a battle that would involve formations, strategies, and battles in a complex web that would influence numerous lives. Whether they were there on the battlefield, actively taking part in the conflict, or they were at home. The fate of many would depend on some of the actions that would occur at the Battle of Eylau. Some of the events would have aftermaths that would continue to have an effect on many other circumstances. Following the events of the Battle of Eylau, the Battle of Heilsberg would occur sometime after. It would play its own part in the Napoleonic Wars, and would follow other events like the Siege of Danzig, which had seen the contribution of Friedrich Adolf von Graf Kalkreuth, as well as the French represented by personalities like François-Joseph Lefebvre. Other events that had occurred in the general period had seen the involvement of Ney, as was seen in the Battle of Gutstadt-Diepen, which would occur in June. A battle that would see many events occur during the course of its duration. It would see Ney escape from a conflict that had involved the likes of Levin August von Bennigsen. Ney had found himself outnumbered in this battle, but had still been able to make a showing of it. Russia had made plans concerning Ney and his forces prior to this battle, and some of the events surrounding and involving it had seen the involvement of several key individuals in several locations. Now at the Battle of Friedland, whose general outcomes would be a massive loss for the Russian forces who would be forced into a retreat. The fighting would see the forces fight and race for certain positions at some points in time during the conflicts, and would see the participation of individuals like Grouchy and Nansouty, as well as individuals like Lannes. Napoleon would give orders to Ney at certain points in time, as he had at many times during the course of the wars. These instructions would have a general impact on the outcomes of the battle. Dupont would also play a role in the events of the battle. The French casualties would be less than those of the Russians. One of the strengths of Napoleon's armies was its mobility. This would come to play a role at certain parts of the conflicts like it had at other critical battles that had preceded it, giving key advantages that could be used to overcome the opponent. The ensuing negotiations at Tilsit would see many important changes and would see discussions occur between several parties. Amongst them would be Napoleon and Alexander I. Battle of Aspern-Esling, 1809. The battle would take place in the year of 1809 and would see the participation of several important figures, amongst who was Napoleon himself, André Massena, Archduke Charles, and Johann von Hiller. The outcomes of the fateful and important battle would be the victory of Austria. The fighting would see both sides exhausted after having fought with much vigor, determination, and strength. The defeat would be an anomaly in an otherwise previously successful military campaign under Napoleon, which had seen relatively few defeats for the renowned strategist. At least one other defeat for the French Republic had come in the form of the Battle of Trafalgar, which had occurred in October of 1805. Many casualties would come as a result of the conflict at the Battle of Aspern-Esling, with a notable loss for Napoleon being a man by the name of Marshal Jean Lannes. Other individuals who would fall due to the conflict would include Louis Vincent Joseph Leblanc de Saint-Hilaire. Fighting would be fierce with both sides showing strength and determination. Prior to the battle, Napoleon's choice to move his forces across the bridge would be a risky move that he knew could go wrong. He would, however, go through with it. The Battle of Aspern-Esling would be unlike the battles that had preceded it, like the Battle of Austerlitz and the Battle of Marengo. The Battle of Marengo would see the participation of the French Republic, on whose side were persons the likes of Napoleon Bonaparte, Louis Desailles, Jean Lannes, and the Habsburg monarchy, on whose side was Michael Melas. At the end of the fighting, there would be negotiations which would see the involvement of Melas and would see the Austrians withdraw from some of the regions they were in. Other benefits would come from the Battle of Marengo, including an improvement in Napoleon's political position and an enhancement in the way that some people viewed him. It would also grant him more power from which he could carry on some of the things he had wanted to accomplish. Prior to the events that would occur during the battle, another failed attempt had been made by the French to cross the Danube. This would be hampered, with resistance being encountered by the French troops. The French afterwards would then choose Lubao as a point of crossing, and many of them would arrive on the island. The Archduke would have his own plans. Given the circumstances that he was in, Napoleon would know that the crossing would have its risks. He would therefore try to mitigate some of these and preempt some of the possible challenges that would come from the crossing. The crossing would go on for hours and hours and would see numerous troops move. Dangers would also exist in other aspects of the crossing. The battle would start at some point in time and would see the involvement of Hitler on the Austrian side. Much of the fighting on the day would be remarkable for the strength and the determination that was shown by both sides. The Austrian columns would meet challenges in what they were trying to achieve, as ground would be difficult to gain, and a lot of it would still be in the possession of the French throughout some of these moves. Numerous individuals would be drawn into the fighting. Napoleon's center would move towards the artillery of his opponents. Fierce fighting would occur, but the French would also meet their own challenges, despite being able to chase away some of the Austrian gunners from their positions. Over the course of the battle, fighting would occur at various points and would involve several different persons, as fierce fighting would be seen on both sides in a battle, with moves and countermoves made between the warring sides. At some point in time in the fighting, the French and Austrian armies would be very near to each other. Involved in the fighting would be individuals like Massena and Rosenberg. Attacks and counterattacks would see fierce fighting between the two forces, but things would eventually end badly for Napoleon and his forces. The French forces would eventually have to withdraw. An event known as the Battle of Wagram would, however, follow in the months that followed, and would see Napoleon and his forces once again attempt to cross. That marks the end of the 4th episode into Napoleon Bonaparte. If you enjoyed the episode, please take the time to subscribe to catch more episodes on other topics, as well as the next episode in the series.